Be advised, you are coming in weak and unreadable.
Say again, Com Tower. This is Pacho. Do you read me over?
Pacho, this is Com Tower. I read you Lima Charlie.
Com Tower, Com Tower. Request permission to launch and commence the field op. Over.
Stand by. Pacho, permission granted. I say again, permission granted.
Roger that. Launching podcast in 3, 2. You are now entering the field op with your host, Pacho Correa, Chief Warrant Officer 3, United States Marine Corps retired. Get some. Hurrah! Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another week. Baby Friday is upon us. Friday night's Eve, but it's goddamn, it's almost the weekend. We got an amazing show ready for you today. With us accompanying me today, I think I'll skip all the pleasantries, but you know that, hey, you know what I do? Yeah, I'm an amazing company. The VA is another great company that or organization that helps us veterans. And at the end of the day, if you like this show, stick around, like, subscribe, and follow. Pass me around like a joint at a party, but tell somebody all about it because we're here to build a network and a community of passing information. So like, subscribe, and follow, as I said. And well, today we got an amazing treat. We got Mr. Rob Banas on our show. He is one of our own. Rob, not only, is a huge advocate for us as veterans, but he himself is a veteran as well. And he's got a lot of cool things. He's also you own, is it, can we say that you own the show, the Lima Charlie Show? That's like your creation. You are actually, so Rob, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our crowd?
Yeah, I started that show during the pandemic. It was kind of I think we all had to find a hobby for sanity purposes. So yeah, I started the Lima Charlie Show back in 2022. And that's on a local AM radio station upstate Buffalo, New York. But now it's a national syndication, so that's kind of cool. But it started with just 2 veterans, right? The owner of the station's a veteran. It's become a friend of mine over the years. And literally on Veterans Day, I pitched the idea. I was like, we should just have a show where 2 vets talk. He goes, done.
That's exactly how this show kind of started. I think I talked about it on. And by the way, everybody, I have been also on. Rob was amazing that he reached out to me and brought me onto his show. So, and I said, hey, dude, because we had an amazing conversation at that time. But yeah, that's how this show started, dude. Literally, I started on a podcast talking to my buddy Aaron Siebert, and I told him the same thing. I'm like, dude, we should just be a show where we're just kind of like bullshitting. 2 vets, talking trash about back in the day. And he kind of passed on it because he was busy. But Brian Colburn, the owner of Sitchradio.com, he's a Marine, fellow Marine. So same thing. It's like, done. Yeah, I'm all over it. So he gave me the blueprint.
Yeah, Marines and Army grunts, we don't really think things through. We just kind of go. When it's time to go, we just do it.
It's kind of like hold my beer type of
knock
thing.
the wall down and just go, right?
Yes, exactly. Hold my beer. Or you hear the sergeant first class, hey, watch this, that's how we do things. But you have, I think by nature we're all risk takers as a whole. And I think, and not just to join, and I don't want to put, Marine or whatever. I think to join into the service, you got to be somewhat of a risk taker. It's kind of like you're born to it. Don't you agree?
Agreed. You're either too foolish or too whatever, but whatever it is that got you those raise your hand and sign, that's one decision. But then to stay in after that first 24 hours in boot camp, that's the deciding moment, right? There's a few people that don't make it through the entry phase, but those of us that stayed in and just kept going along with this crazy idea of having strangers yell at you and have to do all this stuff just to get through basic training. It's a special breed. It's for sure a special breed. And yeah, you have to take on the risk. I mean, I always tell people, because I had some folks years ago, they go, why would you ever join the service? It's so dangerous. I'm like, have you ever crossed a busy street? I mean,
no kidding.
Have you ever read what happens to people any day? You just read the newspaper. I mean, there's risks everywhere all day. you might as well choose your risk and if it's worth doing what it's for. And I can't think of a greater cause than to protect our country. So yeah, we
Now,
take risks. And when you get out of the service, where I'm a little bit baffled is some people lose that, whether they don't want to start that business they always talked about when they were in the service, or they don't want to, try out something new. Why not? You took all those other risks.
yeah, yeah.
So,
What time frame did you came, and I guess what time frame did you came into the military? What branch
oh,
also?
sure.
And but what was your calling, so to speak?
Yeah, I kind of did things a little bit, I wouldn't say different. I mean, this happens a lot, obviously, but for me, I grew up near Buffalo, New York. And if you're not familiar with that area, everyone just knows about the snowstorms, right? Because we have a major sports team, the Buffalo Bills. So, if nothing else, if you've heard of the Bills and you've seen the game, you see all the snow.
Yeah,
Well, as you can imagine, sometimes we do get massive storms, and sometimes the National Guard has to help. So somewhere in the early 90s, two things happened. First of all, you had the first Gulf War, and I was just wrapping up school, so I wasn't old enough yet, but I was watching that unfold. And then, I noticed something. I noticed that there was this element of the Army that could go to war, but then also be in the community helping with like natural disasters. And I was really ignorant to that. I never knew that until I was a teenager. My father served Air Force during Vietnam. I had a lot of uncles that were in the Army full time. I did wind up having like an in-law that was in the National Guard, so I picked his brain about it for a while. But it was kind of a new, like it was a weird concept to me. And then I found out that if you go into the National Guard training, it's the same as full-time Army, and you can choose to go full-time afterwards. So once I learned that, I'm like, well, hey, you want to talk about risk and reward?
right.
I could sign the contract with the National Guard, and if I like it, at the end, you can go full-time. So anyways, I wound up joining in 97. It was a summer 97. And, the first couple of years, first of all, National Guard back then was, we'll say, laxed. By the time I got to a National Guard unit, no offense to any of them, it was just a lot of folks that had either done their time, were close to retirement, or a lot of them joined in the 80s during the Cold War. And I'm not discounting the Cold War. There's a lot of things going on
Right.
there, but the National Guard seemed to be a pocket of people that were already done with their time with the active duty and they were just kind of riding out their inactive time. Or it was people that were in the National Guard, but really the National Guard wasn't being used overseas. See that as a potential real risk. But as you know, 9/11 changed all of that. Fast tracking to the real action there is, we got activated multiple times stateside. Obviously, people sent everyone went to ground zero, though we didn't get anywhere near the actual site, but everyone deployed to that area. And then they all got police missions after that. So we wound up being with that. I did some time on the border because I'm near Canada. So they put us
Yeah.
on the border. I didn't spend much time there, probably like 30 days or something like that. And then they started to do National Guard and police show of force. So like that was downstate. So that was New York City. The subways, which is where I spent my time. Some people got deployed to the airports. Some people went to the shipping yards. So it was just like show of force. And then eventually we all went overseas. And as you know, at one point, like my campaign was Iraq. That was in '04. At one point, 75% of the forces in that year were all National Guard, which is
Yeah.
it's mind-blowing to think about that. The majority of the forces were not full-time Army. And there's something to say because, believe me, there's lots of jokes about the National Guard and reserves, but the reality is our units literally had control of the like our unit, the I was attached to 69th Infantry. We literally had the AO of Baghdad in '04 and '05 when we were doing things like standing up their own National Guard, helping them with their first elections in 50 some odd years. So it's kind of crazy to think you would never have gone to West Point and studied in a book that, in the 80s or 90s that the National Guard would be used to control a combat zone.
No, and we worked when we were there in '03. We it was it's funny because we talked about, again, we talked a lot on your show, and because we kind of walked the somewhat of the same paths. But yes, in '03, we supported it, and we took an entire reserve battalion. It was the first time it was done in over 50 years, an entire reserve unit of Marine Corps reservists, whole battalion, to Iraq. You guys call it AGR, but
Right.
we were personal permanent personnel at a reserve duty station, and we took all these guys and gals over there, and they did great. I mean, they did an amazing job, and we did run into some of your counterparts, and we were doing. We thought that we were, man, 7 months. We thought 7 months, 7, 8 months was long. Man, we ran into National Guard units. I mean, these poor bastards,
Year and a
17
half. Year and a
fucking,
half.
yeah,
Like
dude.
it's World War II. Like we're
I was
going
like,
for.
I'm like, holy I from that point on, I stopped complaining. And then, so we ran. Quick story: we ran into this National Guard unit from Puerto Rico, and no shit. So when we took over that AO, we did, we did the high fives with the leaving unit, and they're like, yeah, hey, we call this the retirement home. It was by the refinery. It was about, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 clicks away from Baghdad, and
Yeah.
it was an oil refinery. And he goes, yeah, hey, you guys are gonna have to resupply the retirement home. And I'm like, what the fuck? What is it? Dude, so it was all these people from Puerto Rico, National Guard. I swear to God, I was in my late 20s at the time, and everybody was like 40 plus. I mean, their captain was in his 60s, their OIC, and it was just like all these older people,
Yeah. When they said
and
old guard, they meant old
so
guard.
so when you had to start post, you've seen the big drum, the big giant drum, the towers of drums that you have to climb.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of their posts, and they were putting he was a sergeant, no, he was a specialist. This dude looked like he was like 70, and so we left him with some of our corpsmen, and and our corpsman came back after a while. He talked to our OIC and he's like, "Hey, sir, you need to tell him to stop putting this guy on there because they called that la que la paila, like the cauldron. Because when you were at the top, dude, the sun blazed all day. It was like you were freaking frying. The frying
Sure.
pan is what So
Sure.
anyway, so yeah, it was crazy, but it was amazing. To me, looking back, is how these folks who are embedded in the community were called to action, and all of them were like, hell yeah, I'm in. Psh, I signed that line, so hey, let's go. It's
Yeah, I
crazy.
mean, to your point, we were deployed the whole time between training because we had to go to the National Training Center in California. You have to qualify and do some things there. So I don't know how many weeks that was, but between the day that we left, let's say New York, to the day we got home, it was like just shy of 18 months. It was like 17 months and change. And I'll tell you, there were people that were teachers, nurses. It was all male unit, but all walks of life. It was an infantry unit. Uh, Firefighters. We had people that were IT professionals. We had people like in my world, that Wall Street people. Because again, the National Guard unit was from New York City. So think about every job there is, as you can imagine, in New York City, you have all walks of life who you
Yeah,
might not have ever thought about before 9/11 also spent some time in the military. Whether they did active duty and they were just writing it out afterwards in the Guard, or they just signed up with the Guard. So getting deployed, you have all the diversity of different careers, different mindsets. I was self-employed. There's people that are like the creative problem solving that happens when you have that collection of people that had military training, but also a very, very deep knowledge of civilian sector professions. Holy cow. I mean, and here's the funniest part. Our equipment was horrible. I mean, we were not up
oh
to
yeah,
speed. We called our vehicles hillbilly armor because we were going over there with like 1970s, 80s era trucks, like Vietnam era equipment, and they weren't outfitted for anything. A lot of them were rusted out floorboards. I remember vividly because I was one of the drivers, just going from what was it, Camp Beering or whatever, crossing the berm there, like 500 something miles. I was the lead vehicle. It was a 5 ton, And I could have put my foot right through it if I wanted to. I could have been a Fred Flintstone doing that thing, you know. And so we up armored our own vehicles
Yeah,
because we
with
were worried about things happening. So a lot of the mechanics, guys like you with skill sets, you know, a lot of creative stuff we did those trucks, trying to mitigate our risk if we get hit. And luckily the ride in, at least in my patrol, the ride in was somewhat smooth. There was no real damage, but we outfitted the trucks the best we could. And when I think about this in retrospect, it's really remarkable when you think of statistics, because you and I both do math as part of our day jobs, and
yeah.
it's really remarkable to me when I think about that. That the hottest time of that war, 3 out of 4 service members were in the National Guard. Somehow we managed to every month have less casualties. Somehow we managed to secure the area more each month. Somehow we managed to have free elections, which was it wasn't easy, but it was a lot. I'll say a lot more successful than we had anticipated. We created relationships with the locals, like you know, the villages, of course, have their own little groups of people that run areas. You think about all that being accomplished, and it was remarkable because at the end of it, somehow we still, I mean, we got some big wins. We had some really big wins without the full-time training leading up to it. And the only irony that's a little not funny is that on the way back, we came home, we were flying, I'm probably going to be off a week or two, but well, I could look up the dates obviously, but the unit, so we were a battalion out of New York City, the 69th. We were under a brigade out of New Orleans, which is the 256 Brigade. Um, fantastic group. But a lot of them were air artillery by training. Like that was their big sector. So you had infantry and you had artillery. Well, we came back literally, I think I'd have to double check, but I think we were like either 4 or 5 days after Katrina, Hurricane Katrina had decimated New Orleans, among other cities down south. So these poor fellas that were with us and away from their families and away from their jobs and away from their communities, their churches, everything, they had already been gone for a year and a half. They're coming home to potentially no house, no
Wow.
civilian job, no church. Their armory was Jackson's base, I believe, or Jackson Barracks, they called it. Even that was flooded through. And the real irony is, I remember we were changing planes, and it must have been Germany or Ireland. I don't remember which airport, but you know how you have to just swap.
Yeah,
You
it's
don't get
just
to,
you're
you
right.
don't get to do anything in town, but you're just like kind of stuck in this little
Ireland.
airport.
Yeah, it was for us. It was Ireland all the time.
Yeah, it might have been. Well, we did both. I just don't remember which one was which, and each trip was one
Yeah,
off. But anyways, it was either Germany or Ireland. We come back, so a bunch of us are huddled into these little tiny airport areas
yeah.
with these little old school TVs mounted to the ceiling. This is 2005, and we're watching the news of this devastating aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And all these fellows that are with me, they're recognizing things on the TV and they're talking about, man, that's my house, or that's my job. I guess I don't have a job. And then the real part that really hit home for all of them is if you look at any of the news broadcasts from back in those days, New Orleans deployed the military in the early days. And you know who they deployed? The 101 Airborne, full time.
Wow.
So the irony is I'm these incredible men who had just sacrificed and went through all sorts of hell as National Guardsmen. And they're coming home and they're watching what they're going to come home to. No parade for sure, right? You're coming home and you're probably going to be on orders to continue this
Yeah.
cleanup. So you talk about trying to connect with your family and get established. No one's got time
Nope.
for whatever you went through because everyone else has new stuff to go through. I mean that, and then to watch an elite fighting force full time filling sandbags and you know getting in little boats and going and checking on people. Like in other words, the elite fighting forces were doing the job that you would have thought was the job of the National Guard. And I was with folks from the National Guard who had just finished doing what you would think was an elite fighting force job.
Yeah.
So the irony there is never lost upon me or anyone I served with. I mean, that was those guys had, I would say, the hardest hit psychologically, financially, everything. And I don't know. I mean, that's the type of stuff that could wipe out a generation of, whether you want to call it wealth building or whatever. There's a big hit there that takes potentially even now, decades later. I'm sure a lot of them are still trying to get through the aftermath of it.
Yeah. No, and you bring up some good points on what you just said. I think we've all heard the word. I don't know what you guys say in the army, but in the Marine Corps we always say "semper gumby," always flexible.
Yeah, always flexible.
Always flexible, and then you make do with what you got. Obviously, we have the Marine Corps being the smallest, and our budget being the smallest. 100% accurate. That especially with the reserve forces, dude, we were going in, even though we were in on the phasing phase of the new trucks, we went in over there with old 5 tons, 900s, 800s, old, first generation Humvees. We didn't even have the A2s or the up armor. So when we got there, yeah, we had to up armor our own shit. And even the amazing thing is, because we used to, us active duty people, we would bag on the reservists. We would call them Marine Light. Oh, you guys get all the perks of being a Marine without the bad aftertaste and whatever. All kidding aside, yes, they did bring a different perspective. Nothing beats that PFC, private ingenuity, whatever. But these guys brought it from different walks of lives. They brought like shit that I didn't even think of. Like a lot of them brought what do you call it? You could buy them an AutoZone, basically, because it's a 24-volt system, converters that they will hook up to the battery system, and boom, now you have a converter that you can plug a DVD player, you can plug whatever. And it was like, I'm like, man, I mean, I've been on active duty for a long freaking time, for 10 years now. Why didn't we think of shit like this? I had our master sergeant who was the dude, um, Tim Stratton. Shout out to Tim Stratton. He's in LA, retired now, fully retired. But this dude, get this shit, dude. He made a canteen cup heater with the thing that you plug into your car, the little plug-in thingamajigger with the wires, and then the two wires at the end. He attached them on like a money clip, and it was a glow plug. So when he would put it, he would insert the glow plug in his coffee, in his water. Obviously the glow plug was clean, but he would, and then he would plug that into the slave cable where you put, a slave cable, everybody, by the way, is what we call jumper cables for military. So he would put it in the slave cable receptacle hole, that thing, and then it will heat up. The glow plug would heat up, and it will heat his water in like a minute.
Yeah.
But just shit like that these guys, bring. Yep. And then to your other point is that, again, we're not saying that they're civilians because they're service members, but then at one point we had to create a mission where we became like a Trojan horse. We were driving around in this 5-ton that was all up. It had sandbags on, all apartment with sandbags that looked like it wasn't hardened, and then people laying down on the ground and then basically attracting for fire because some of your counterparts were getting lit up on this one army base. So we were driving around, and then every time they would get fired at with this it was a decoy. Then all these, reservists would jump on, return fire to kill the enemy in that area. So to your point, you have all these reservists, both Army, Navy, from all walks of life, saying, hey, I signed that dotted line. I'm going to go I'm going to go over there, kick some ass, whatever, and then cash that blank check, God forbid, under my name, so. God bless, all those guys and gals who 17 months, 7 months or whatever, they went over there and did their part,
Yeah. And I was among the luckiest ones. I mean, my ETS was already in process while we were there. So I came home. I didn't have to, I mean, I was done. I was completely done.
Yeah.
A lot of these fellows, they went back to Iraq. They went to Afghanistan. Some of them even wound up in Ukraine not too long after that, because Ukraine, people forget we had a Ukraine advisory role, if you want to call it that. We don't know what that really meant, but that was what, 2011, 12, 13, in those ranges of,
Right.
like, some of the people I served with stayed in and did 4, 5, maybe even 6 tours. So you talk about trying to adjust to life with potentially a family. Maybe people are trying to get their school done or a career path or whatever. As a National Guard or reservist, there's a huge disruption to that, and that's fine. I mean, that's part of the deal, but that was never. If you were to look at any SOPs or battle roster plans from West Point or wherever, you would never have seen that as oh, if we go to war, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to use National Guard and reservists. That was never the plan. And certainly no one that signed up thought, well, gee, if I go to war, I might have to go to war, come home, go to war, come home, go to war, come home. I mean, when you wonder why so many of the global war and terror veterans are struggling with whether it be post-traumatic or what have you, there's a lot that goes into that. And if you look at their DD-214s and you see multiple tours,
Yeah.
well, no wonder. I mean, no wonder. I mean, how do you keep readjusting back and forth? Imagine if the World War II vets came home and then 9 months later they went back to World War II, right? And then came home and did it again a year later. No, that's not, if you want to protect the nation's best weapon, which is the brain of a service member, you got to give some reprieve. You got to get them out of the war zone so that they can retool their mind.
I don't think, we've had a lot of conflicts over the years.
Mhm.
I will say that this whole global war on terrorism, or even after 9/11, how things pretty much went down. We were for so many years, and a lot of people are already analyzing this, but we were so still in the mindset that, and even we can even apply this to Vietnam, because we're still in that mentality of, I mean, almost to the point of Civil War timeframes. Hey, I'm standing here, they're standing over there. They fire. Okay, they missed us. Our turn. Hang on. You
Right.
know. Okay, now you should. We were.
Take
So we were in
turns.
that. Yeah, we were in that. Still in that thought process. Okay, I know my enemy, or they're there. Okay, I get you. You get me. Trench warfare. Germans. World War II. We were still in that archaic mindset, so to speak. And nobody, dude. I mean, when I came in, I was like, man, the only enemy in the Cold War, the Russians, but no, and shit that you saw on TV, but that was it. And then 9/11 pops off, and it's like, oh wait, I'm a reservist. I mean, I live, because that was the talk that we had when we were getting ready, when we were training these guys and showing them the videos, and I knew the next. I remember we had them all in the cafeteria, in our chow hall at the reserve, our cafeteria, and this major's talking, another reserve major, and the guy thought that he was like, Maximus and shit. So he shows that he's talking about landmines and this and that, and and this is a battalion of strikers, like you guys call them. We call them LAVs, light armor vehicles.
Right.
Anyways, so he shows this Israeli, personnel carrier, and drives over a mine, and it just completely decimates this freaking thing. I mean, you see a body like up in the air. And I was sitting in the back, as I was a senior sergeant. I turned around to my counterpart, who's staff on. I'm like, watch, we're gonna have a bunch of people UA tomorrow. UA meaning AWOL, as you guys call it. And sure as shit, the next day, we had like several people who didn't show up for formation, and we had one guy that became a conscientious objector. All kind people didn't want to go after that video, and it was like, you gotta my point is, you also have to keep it real that, hey, you may be in the community as a component. However, the reality of the thing is that there is a chance that you're going to have to go, and we have to stay in tune with the times as well. We just can't be relying on archaic thoughts and mentalities or whatever, because, I mean, again, even Sun Tzu said it. I mean, the battlefield is fluid, and you have to adapt to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So so now that you did your time, and I know you're still supporting it. How did you get into your line of work as far as I guess what attracted you to doing investments and such, and even doing the whole radio because you and me kind of do the same shit. It's like
Yeah. It's so it's wild. So the work thing came about kind of slowly. I was very blessed and fortunate at a young age to have awesome people in my life. So there was this wonderful couple, family friends from my church. Husband was a financial advisor, which, when you're a kid, that means nothing. You don't know what that means. But, you know, I had the luxury of having them in my life, and they watched me go off to the army. They watched me start a business and do all sorts of interesting things. And then years later, 9/11, the war, come home, etc. So the husband was a friend and to this day, incredible friend, but an advisor on multiple levels, not just about the markets, but life in general. So during the war, um, he's an avid reader, of course, because that's the nature of this business for the most part. Those of us that actually manage investments, you read all the time.
yes,
So I asked him, I pestered him basically for things to read, and he gave me an incredible library of things to read, like a syllabus. Like, okay, if you want to learn some things, here's what you got to read. You read Ben Graham, and you read Warren Buffett, of course. You read who
yeah,
taught him and who taught him, and you go back further. And before you know it, you start falling in love with this stuff. For me, anyways, and especially when I had downtime. When you're in the military, you have some downtime, and even after the military, even after I was home, I didn't want to. I love to read, but I didn't want to read at that time. I wasn't. How do I say this? Coming out of the war, I didn't want to keep thinking about the war. I wanted to do something else. I wanted my mind to shift. So if you read about companies and how they started, that's fascinating to me. If you read about people who manage companies, maybe they didn't start it, but they wound up, turning the company around from the verge of bankruptcy to like becoming the best in the sector. That's fascinating to me. You learn about their marketing approach or whatever. Or how you lead thousands of employees. I found that was just stuff I really enjoyed reading. And then you start to connect some dots. You go, well, geez, company A does it this way, company B does it this way. And look, their shares are worth way more than, you start to connect what's good management, what's a good product, So anyways, all that being said, I had the privilege of working with this gentleman for a number of years. And then, I got my license. He supported how I got through the initial phase. As you know, the initial phase is the tough part, right?
oh
You
yeah,
got to do the studying, you got to meet people, you got to figure out what you're doing. Um, it can be fun and exhilarating, especially for folks like you and I who spent some time in the military. Kind of like a basic training, right? You're learning
yeah,
things you don't understand, but you're going to go through it. So eventually you get through that. And in this business, if you can get through the first year or two, you got a job.
yeah,
You get through the first 5 years or so, you got a career. And if you can make it, luckily I'm one of the lucky ones, you make it 10 plus years. Now you got a business. So I rebranded and named what I do, and it's kind of fun. I use an army term for it. Wilco is part of my business name,
yeah,
and that's fun because people that are in the military pick up on it right away, whether it's on my business card or an ad on the radio, whatever it is. They hear Wilco and they know what that is, which means will comply. And if they don't know what it is, they always ask me because most people in this business name their practice after their name, like Banas, whatever, whatever. So people will say, well, what's Wilco? Who's Wilco? I go, well, it means will comply. And they go, wow, what a great customer service mantra. Well, I can assure you, when you say Wilco in the military, you're not thinking customer service, but you're still thinking, I'm going to get this work done. That's the whole point. You're going to get it done. So I enjoy the business. It's wonderful. Most of my days are spent reading and communicating with what I've read. That's really
yeah.
my day. But then on Saturdays, as you know, I host this fun radio show. And I've always advertised, when I went independent, I advertised on the station because it's veteran owned. And as I mentioned earlier, on Veterans Day 2022, Bill and I shook hands and just said, let's try this out. So I've been interviewing other veterans like yourself. I do that every Saturday, and I do it a little bit efficient for my own, my work life's pretty busy. Monday through Friday is pretty busy for me. So Saturdays, I typically, not always, but typically I record the interview, and then a week later I'll edit that for broadcast. So I kind of have like a little bit of lead time where I don't have to rush. It's not live. I'm not taking call-ins. It's really a way for me to really make sure I can capture the veteran's story with as very little editing as possible. I never want to cut off someone's story. So to do that, I kind of have to do it, ahead of time, and then thoughtfully make
Right.
sure it can fit into the airtime I'm allowed. And interesting enough, we started off as a 1 hour format, and that wasn't enough time. I had no ads. I just basically bought the airtime because I was an advertiser on the station anyway, so we just kind of made it into a package. And he's been very wonderful because he's a veteran himself. He's been very wonderful with how we do that. And then, a couple years goes by and you realize, okay, there's a need for this. So it went from 1 hour to 2 hours, and there are some sponsors now, but I'm happy with how that works because they're sponsors that are doing things for the veteran community. So, I'm okay with it. Um, Obviously that's my comfort level. So, and every week I get to meet someone new. So for me, it's like going to the gym, right? In a way, it's like
Yeah.
you're working out different muscles, except it's all right here. And I learn something every week. Every week I'm learning about, I've had someone from every branch of the military now, including Space Force. And I've had folks as young as 22 years old that are veterans now. They're already out. And the gentleman so far that has the age championship is Sam Baker. Sam Baker, God bless him, just turned 103 last month.
Oh, wow.
And he's still busier than you and I put together.
That's good.
And he's a Marine. Hoorah.
Hoorah, get some. It's funny that as we always want to do, like I was always looking for something to do in the sense I've always been a fan of YouTube and venues like that. I'm a frustrated actor. I've done that, when I was younger. I always knew I wanted to do something, involved with I guess we call this, social media now, but back then broadcasting, whatever. So, for me it was kind of the same thing. I wanted to build a platform or something that, I would get to shoot the shit with a veteran here and there because you gravitate towards those, things like that or like-minded people because even at work, when I was with corporate, it's like as you pick with the vets, it's the lingo, nine times out of ten you've worn the same type of combat boots and done the same shit, so it's by nature. So I wanted to do something similar and just get to bullshit and get with somebody and know their story. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here and and the common denominator doesn't matter what branch, whatever. It's like, oh yeah, bro. I remember exactly. There's something similar that you're like, oh man, and this dude. We've always had that one lieutenant that he's just like, God damn. How did you ever even make it through officer candidate school? Or we've always had that one senior enlisted sergeant major or whatever that you're like, bro, this dude. Or in retrospect, you've always had those, you've been amongst a good mix of leaders that are like, man, this dude was this, I would follow this dude to any hill. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, sure.
What do you miss the most about the service?
Honestly, it's just kind of what you're talking about. It's the camaraderie. It's
Yeah.
knowing that, and this is really hard for people to understand if they're not from a military family. And believe me, I have folks that call or email or post something online after one of our shows that they're not familiar with the military, and they really find it hard to believe this, but there's this cohesiveness that happens. And I know we're taught it, right? I know that during basic training you're taught this, but it's really the experiences that are after basic training where it reinforces it in your mind that you really can pull drama out of the equation, and you can work with people on impossible tasks and get them done like it's nothing. You can build a Bailey Bridge and have tanks roll over it and then take it apart and make it back to the barracks for dinner. Try getting a labor force of 40 people
Yeah.
to do I'll tell you what. Tell you what.
No.
Randomly go to any office in corporate America and ask 10 people if they can agree on what they're going to have for lunch and what time they're going to eat it. Go ahead. Show me that conversation. Okay, there's something about the military where you might be in a room full of people with different religious backgrounds, different everything
Yep.
everything's different about them except the uniform. And what that uniform means to us supersedes all that other nonsense. So
Yes.
push comes to shove, that's what I miss. I miss the fact that we all have to find a way to just get our work done. And I don't mean that like let's make profit for the bosses. I don't mean that. I mean as a society, we seem to be so obsessed with what we don't like about other people or what we don't like about, I mean, obviously politics is a big thing now, which drives me crazy. You know, the amount of people that have lost friends over political preference in this day and age, to me that I don't know. I love my family and friends more than I'll ever hate a politician. So it's sad, and I think the pandemic made people kind of go back to a tribal time. And
Yeah.
that's not a dig or something negative about tribal lifestyle. I'm just saying that we could have a society where people actually get along on the big stuff. You know, have all your personal thoughts all you want.
Yeah.
That's fine. But don't sacrifice the mission of having a better community because you don't like the way someone mows their lawn. You know what I mean? Like you gotta pick what you want to argue about. And that's what I miss because in the military, you could literally be having an argument with someone on an individual basis, and then the sirens go off or something happens, and all of a sudden
All that
you're
shit is gone.
yeah, one as you say, one fight, right?
One team, same fight. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And I truly feel sorry for the majority of Americans that don't know what that's like because it's an incredible feeling. It's an incredible feeling. I've had plenty of disagreements with people in the barracks or in the truck while driving, right? While in a patrol, I've had arguments with people that seem like they're really important arguments until you realize they're not.
Yeah.
And then the only thing that matters is that we all get each other out of that
Yep.
situation quickly and intact. And when you have that type of life experience, everything else is gravy. I mean, and maybe that's why I'm so casual, but now about like things that don't bother me. It's like, no, how can you get bothered by anything else after that?
Yeah. I mean, really, I remember and I do miss, one thing is that you could walk around the barracks and I've been sober 10, 11 years now. However, you could walk from one room to room and have a drink in each room. One guy may have the old, and again, I never thought anything wrong about the Confederate flag. That was the flag of Georgia back, year not that long ago, which is
Right.
no problem. I mean, nobody fucking minded. But and you have many people from all kinds sorts of life, and shit went down, and whatever differences or beefs you had, it was gone. A case in point, I had when I was in Iraq, I had an M203, the grenade, on the piece attached to my M16, and I had this vest full of, basically grenades. I had the vest with the 24. Anyways, and I remember I got into an argument with this guy, Roger Rents. I could tell so many. I could do an entire podcast with a small series on this dude. I mean, I knew this guy, but not to bag on the guy too bad. But him and I almost went at it. I remember throwing my fucking weapon on the ground and I slammed this vest with these grenades like wham! I mean, the shit could have exploded, dude. But I was like, let's go out to go. I mean, we were gonna go out. I mean, they had to hold us back and all this other shit. However, I would have taken a bullet for that dude
Yeah.
any day. So, because it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
And you're right. It gives you a bigger perspective because there's bigger and much bigger issues that we should be worrying about. It's just that, everything else is just bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It ain't worth it.
Yeah.
That's what I learned
Agreed.
too. You know.
Agreed.
So Rob, where can people find you, bro?
Well, the Lima Charlie Show, that's the website that has all the archives. So the LimaCharlieShow.com. And I have an awesome helper, Meg, producer Meg's been in it from almost the very beginning. So she put the site together. She archives everything. You're on there, of course, your profile. So people can learn about guests if they want. And we have some social media. She does a good job with that. I'm an AM radio guy, so I don't do social media myself, but she does. And then and during the week, like I said, I just have it's called Wilco Wealth Management. So that's the name of that website, wilcowealthmanagement.com and the LimaCharlieShow.com. Those are the two sites that I'm on.
And those show links will be on the show description as well, so that way people can hit you up. Rob, thanks so much for being here, brother. Thanks so much for
my honor, my pleasure. This is always fun. I always love catching up with you, and I love your show. I caught another one just this morning before I went off to the office. So keep up what you're doing because it's fun. And it's helpful. You're helping a lot of folks. So
thanks a lot, brother. Well, everybody, hey, this is my man Rob Banas. Make sure you check him out on the Lima Charlie Show. I'm on there as well. He's got a huge resource. But before we go, I think Rob and I can agree that, hey, if you've been ruminating and if you've been going down that dark hole where you feel like you can't dig yourself out, is reach out to a friend, reach out to a buddy, reach out to me on the show. The bottom line is that, nobody, while we can talk about here and banter back and forth, nobody wants to talk about you at your, about you on your funeral. So do a buddy check if you haven't heard from somebody, because at the end of the day, we just want you to be here. We got much bigger fish to fry. So with that being said, everybody, Ice Tomas, Dice the Key. We're going to go ahead and end this right here. Yat, hoorah, get some.